Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. We're going to head out to Pennsylvania, and we're going to talk with Beau Martonik. And Beau is the host, the founder of East Meets West Hunt podcast. Beau, I'm super excited after our warm-up. I mean, I'm ready to go hunting.
I know, Bruce. I think we could have talked for hours before we even hit record about the upcoming hunting season and just getting excited with stories.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. You know, some of the backstory or warm up. Tom Snyder just killed a beast of a whitetail high in the mountains in a clear cut in Idaho. I mean, when I first saw that deer, I thought it was a Saskatchewan, buck, but it wasn't. And Beau and I were talking about that. Beau, let's stay right there because I know you start off in Pennsylvania hunting mountain bucks. Now, these aren't ag bucks; these are just mountain bucks. So let's just start with the beginning. Go right back to when you started hunting bucks, and we'll catch up to today.
Yeah, so I grew up right in the heart of the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, and not a lot of people think of Pennsylvania as, these giant tracts of public land, but we have over 2.1 million acres of public land just in northern Pennsylvania alone, and most of it is just big woods. Some of it's steep, some of it's more rolling, but just big timber country. And I grew up hunting whitetails there. My family is a huge whitetail hunting family and specifically archery. So I learned to do that at a very young age. And it was one of those things that I just was always involved in, and just from a young age, just loving whitetails and wanting to get better at hunting them and go to new places in Pennsylvania and elsewhere to hunt them. And when I grew up, I always thought that hunting the big woods was I was at a disadvantage to what I was seeing on TV with these people hunting the ag fields and the food plots and everything. And I always thought I was at a disadvantage. But as I grew older, I realized that that's special in its own mind, and I honestly prefer it. And a lot of times, you might not have the antler size of some of the ones that are getting fed maybe a little bit better, but you get some really old, gnarly deer that grow up in this country. And I cut my teeth on it, and I'll do that till the day I die.
So who got you started hunting?
My dad, for the most part, and both of my grandparents, both of my grandfathers on each side were really big into it. And so again, just from a young age, I just was around it and always just watching them. I wanted to be like my dad and my grandpa and everything else, as far as, they'd come back in October. I'd be, dressed up as a little kid for Halloween, and they'd bring their deer back, and I'd just get so excited with it. So I've always looked up to them as, role models of mine, and they've kind of, I guess, put me down the path that I am today.
So was that basically the genesis of East Meets West Hunt podcast?
So yes and no. So the idea behind the podcast kind of started when I took a different turn. Up until 2016, I'd only hunted Pennsylvania and Ohio whitetails. In Ohio, I hunted southern Ohio, which is big timber type area too. So it was similar to PA. But in 2016, I decided to go out west for the first time and chase elk. And when I did that, I just fell in love with it. And I came back and I wrote an article on it. And at the time, I was not a writer whatsoever. I just wrote this for myself, the story of the hunt, and I ended up submitting it to an online magazine that ran the story. And I got a lot of feedback from people on it saying, oh, I wish I could do that, or I wish I had that kind of money or time, and all this stuff that wasn't true. I don't have a lot of money, and I just did a lot of research and kind of figured out how to do it. But what I realized was there was a gap in information for those of us, on the East Coast and, even through the Midwest, that to, plan these adventure style hunts out west. And you can do that through a, do it yourself, over the counter tag type hunt, and do that on a relatively low budget. That's in reach to, anyone if you plan it out correctly. So my goal was for myself to learn more about, Western hunting by talking to some of these, great guests I've had on, but also be able to throw the mic on and have everyone else learn and, be inspired to try it out. But what I learned in the process was what I was doing my whole life in Pennsylvania hunting mountain bucks. That's an adventure to a lot of people too, and, including myself. But there's adventure style hunting close to home. If you might live in, say, the Pittsburgh area, you can drive 2 hours and be in the, the quote unquote mountains of Pennsylvania. And so I've kind of encompassed the two of them. And my slogan is, how do you define adventure? And really what that means is just adventure is yours to define, whether that's an Alaskan sheep hunt or that's, a mountain buck hunt in Pennsylvania. It's up to you. And I just want to be able to give people information on those type of hunts and, inspire them to be able to do that.
I love how you said that, because so many people that I talked to with my podcast are misinformed, and I'll just call it that they think they have to have a lot of money to come to Colorado and go DIY elk hunting. I put in for limited area tags, and I don't get them every year, but I can go hunt elk every single year in areas that I know there's bulls. Are there 300 bulls? Probably not. Are the Pope and Young bulls? Probably. And it's just, to me, at this position, it's the journey, it's the adventure, it's making the memories with your bros and sharing those adventures. That's what gets me really, stoked about this whole, hunting journey that I'm on. And I think from our conversations and warm up that you're exactly the same way.
Yes. No, you couldn't have said it any better. Like, that's for me right now, like, at least right now for the Western hunting stuff, I don't care anything about the size of the animal or anything. I'm hunting the experience. Don't get me wrong. I 100% go there trying to fill a tag, and I would love to shoot a big bull. I love that, but that's not all of it for me. And, I've been able to do this, at a regular working man's budget. I have a full-time job that I work every day, and I've been able to kind of plan my life a little bit around it. And I made hunting as something to me that is just deeply ingrained, and I made it a priority. There's things that come first, bills and family and everything else. But when you can make that stuff a priority and do this on a relatively low budget, it's not out of reach to anyone, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So we got East meets West, and there you are in Pennsylvania. So with your show, let's talk about your guest and what you're trying to get them, or why you invite them on, so they can share something that's educational and knowledge transfer, really.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do with the podcast, and I really I try not to go too far out of kind of the realm and the niche that I kind of have with it. And I try to think of questions that I had as far as an Eastern guy heading west. Say, let's just say, for example, hunting out west. I want to bring people on and talk about some of those things, and don't assume that people know, a certain term or what, this means or that means. Cause I think with, I've learned so much from a lot of the Western hunting podcasts out there, but it took me a while to even get to the baseline of what they were talking about. And I want to, make people not feel intimidated about it. So that's one of my goals is when I'm, bringing these people on, I want to hear their stories and stuff like that. But I really want to make sure everyone's got a takeaway from it and realizing that it's, not out of reach. I don't want to make it sound like it's extremely easy by any means, but I want to show that with some work and with some planning, you can make that stuff happen. So that's what I look for, when I'm looking for, guests for certain topics or, anything else. I kind of have that idea in my mind and just kind of, ask people that I think would be a good fit for those specific ideas.
Want to become a smarter deer hunter? Know when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Well, Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created to do exactly that, because many people have told me they struggle with spending all days in the wood and never seeing a deer, only shooting does and young deer, leaving the woods empty-handed way too many times. Found Mr. Wonderful, but just couldn't get on him, having difficult finding a place to hunt, recognizing possible mistakes you're making every year, having tried and failed to find qualified mentors who deliver results. If you had these frustrations or struggles, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com, and there you'll find a 13-module course to help you solve these problems. Again, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com and find some answers. Well, as you know, this is Whitetail Rendezvous, so most of my listeners are whitetail hunters. But I also know that most of my listeners, covet the opportunity to come out west and hunt elk. So if you could be so kind just to share some of the things you've learned from other people in the next half hour or so, that would get them comfortable, if that's the right word, about saying even this year, and folks, even this year, because the elk season starts. You cannot get a mule deer tag in Colorado. You have to do the limited draw. But there are DIY elk tags available. You just come in their OTC, ergo over-the-counter tags. You just go to Walmart and get one, and you can go elk hunting. So if you'd be, Beau, if you just share with my listeners, here's the top 5 or 10 things that you've learned with your program that you can share with them.
Yeah, no, I can definitely do that. The one thing that I kind of want to start out with is one of the big hurdles that I see with the whole budgeting and price side of things is everyone thinks that you need to have a lot of money in gear and everything else to do it. And I'm going to be the first to tell you that, I'm a gear junkie. I love that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to if I can get a tag, or if I'm going to have the newest, latest, greatest this, I'm going to get a tag. That's what it's all about, just getting out there. The first thing that you need to do is commit, plan it, put it down on the calendar, say you're going to do it. Everything else after that will take some work and planning. But the biggest thing is committing to doing the hunt and kind of figuring out what your expectations are. If, for example, you want to go out and you're happy with the experience, and if you fill a tag, then, that's great. If you don't, then, still that's great. Then that's going to be a little bit different as far as your goals go than if you want to go out and shoot a 330-inch bull, and that's all you care about is checking that off a bucket list. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either of them, but you got to kind of have that up front. If your idea is, just shooting a 330-inch bull, then you'd have a better chance saving some money and going with an outfitter and, doing something like that. But if you want, that adventure side of things and everything along those lines, you need to buy, a tag. I think the going rate, let's just take the top 5 states you're looking at, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, and New Mexico, and you average them out somewhere around $700 for an elk tag. Some are a little bit less, some are a little bit more. So you have that. And if you can get a couple of buddies talked into it with you to drive out there, you can split the gas. So you can go out there, if you had a 3,000 mile round trip and gas was $2.50 a gallon, it'd probably be about $500 for the round trip. You split that up between a few people, you're looking at a few $100 a person. And then, with essential gear, which I do think there's certain gear items that you probably, should spend some money on. And I'll get into that in a minute, but say $500 to $700 in gear for your first trip going there, and $200 in food, and which you'd be spending that, really on groceries anyways. But your total cost of the hunt would be somewhere around $1,900, $2,000, somewhere in that range. And you can definitely bring that down, depending on, what your needs and wants are from a gear standpoint and how you logistically figure that out. But all right, say that you're planning on doing that a year out. That's $165 a month. If it was 2 years, $83 a month, and you kind of see the trend I'm going with there. But that's still a lot of money. But when you think about the things that you spend your money on daily, when you have, Netflix subscriptions and Sirius radio, and say you have, a newer truck that, you're paying anywhere from $400 to $600 a month payment. What if if this is a priority yours, what if you drove a vehicle that was just a couple years older and you saved yourself a few $100 a month? Or, I haven't really listened to Sirius radio in a while. Let's cut that $10 a month out, or whatever it is. There's different things from a budgeting standpoint that you can do to make this happen. And I bring these things up front is because, again, these are some of the biggest roadblocks that I've seen from people is the money thing. And so that's a big one. And, after that, when it comes down to preparing for the hunt, this is, another thing that's a big learning curve. There's so many tools out there these days. And I think the biggest tool is your mind and the knowledge that you gain. So doing things like listening to podcasts, like Bruce is here, mine, or anybody else's, that, just trying to get that information in and trying to learn as much as you can. One thing that's really helped me out a lot when I started going out west, specifically for elk hunting, was Corey Jacobson. His Elk 101 has the University of Elk Hunting, and it's an online course that you subscribe to, and it lays it out from beginning to end, everything through it to help make that hunt happen. And it's a little bit of an investment, about $100 a year to do that, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing for the knowledge that you learn and how you can really be a lot more prepared for that hunt. So that's another thing that, that I've found is really helpful, is really investing in yourself and knowledge and trying to, have plans going forward. And, with whitetails, a lot of times, the way I grew up, if I wanted to go to an area and scout it out, I strapped on my boots and I went for a hike and looked, for the rubs and scrapes and the bedding areas and the terrain features and all of that. But what's so nice now with things like, OnX has their hunt app, and then Google Earth and things like that online, you can scout from a couple thousand miles away and at least have an idea of what you're getting into. And by, utilizing that information you've learned, say on podcasts or reading or anything else with, say where elk live, and you can kind of put those pieces together from scouting online and create yourself a hunt plan. I mean, stay organized, have, 5 areas that, that your areas you think you would go to, one being your primary, and then having backup spots. Because once you go on, some of these trips and you get out there, if you don't find elk and you don't have a backup plan, you're scrambling, you start stressing yourself out. It makes it a lot easier for you to quit. When you have, a system in place to prepare for that, then you're a lot more apt to succeed because you're organized. I mean, it goes that way with anything in life. At my job, if I have everything, laid out, this is what I'm going to be working on. Here are my priorities. I'm going to do a lot better than me just going in and being like, just randomly, going and tackling tasks and everything else. When you have that plan in place, it seems to, help out a lot more. Another thing that I learned from personal experience, and as well as I've learned a ton from some of the guests, is, the physical preparation, physical conditioning for going on these hunts. Am I saying that you need to be in the best shape possible to succeed? No, I'm not saying that. But one thing that I always say is you'll never wish you were in worse shape. And, I've been out, I thought I was in good shape, and I'd get out there and the elevation would hit you and I felt like I was short of breath, and the mountains looked a lot bigger than they did on the internet. That's for sure. So, that was a big thing for me. And some of the things that I do to prepare for that, I work out every morning, and it's one of those things that I just stay disciplined with. And I wake up before work and alarm clock goes off 4:30 in the morning, and I go work out. But what I think is more important than, even the type of workout you're doing is just being consistent with it. If you're walking 2 miles a day or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're doing 3 or you're doing 2.3 or 2.4. That's better than the day before. Just, constantly kind of just working at it and staying consistent. And so the physical conditioning aspect is something that I've, realized for me has been a big proponent in, getting ready for a hunt. And, going from there is, kind of switching back to the whole gear side of things, is whatever gear you decide to use, making sure that you know how to use it and you know the ins and outs. So that practice packing your bag, you have your pack laid out, put everything in there, take it out, put everything in there, put it on your back, see how it feels, take it out, do it again. Because when you're out there and say the weather, it gets bad or it gets dark and your headlamp dies or something like that, just having the knowledge of how to work yourself around it. And that's, something that, they teach a lot in the military and everything else. Just knowing your stuff and being organized with it, I think is super helpful. And again, from personal experience and from talking to a lot of guests, there's a few items that, like, gear wise, that I think are, worth spending money on quality gear. And Bruce, maybe you can comment on this too, living there, but I think a backpack is really important for these type of hunts, because if you're going to be hauling meat out of the backcountry yourself, and with some buddies, a quality pack can really increase your comfort. That's what's on your back every single day. So something like that is really important. My first trip, I found a Memorial Day sale on a backpack and bought it. And it was supposed to be a good bag, but it was really ultra lightweight. I was reading that you needed to have the lightest weight stuff, and I did it and ended up resulting in the bag failing. And I tightened down the straps and the bag ripped and had a, main buckle break and some really unfortunate things. I made sure that, I bought a quality pack the next year. And even with that being said, it didn't, ruin my hunt, but it was something I would rather not happen. And the other thing is boots, and you spend, every single day on your feet. So finding the pair that fits you and your feet is essential. Finding a place to try on boots for Western hunting is kind of difficult, in the East and Midwest. So I've found that, looking for places online that allow free return shipping and exchanges is really crucial. Wear them around your house, climb up your steps, do some different things, that doesn't ruin the chance of returning them, but you can get a good feel for it, because everyone's feet are different. And so I can't say, X, brand and X style is the one you need. That's not the case. It's everyone's a little bit different. So, but just finding something that fits you is important, in my opinion.
Do you want to become a smarter whitetail hunter, knowing when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Over the past 4 years, people have asked me, hey, I'm struggling with spending all day in the woods and never seeing a deer, only getting opportunities at doe or young bucks, leaving the woods empty-handed too many seasons. Located the deer of a lifetime, but just flat out missed. Having difficulties finding a place to hunt, recognizing mistakes that you're making over and over again, and you want to eliminate them. Having tried and failed to find qualified mentors. Well, you come to the right place. Why? Because Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created by me, Bruce Hutchin. It's a 13-module course that'll talk about being lost in the deer hunting forest, never hunted. What is a hunter? What is an adult onset hunter? What rules apply? Finding a mentor, choosing a weapon, finding a place to hunt, scouting a hunt location, stand sites, stand access and exit, reading sign, and when to hunt. All these are available for you at deerhuntinginstitute.com. Go now to deerhuntinginstitute.com and sign up for the best deer hunting course in America. The one thing I would say, the most important thing for the Rocky Mountains, wherever you happen to be in the Rocky Mountains, is first your boots. Because if your boots, you get a blister, you're done. And I don't care if you paid $1,000 for your tag or you're paying an outfitter $10,000. It doesn't matter. You're done. Because even if you're on horses, basically you can't get to where you need to get to. So listeners, take heed of that. I've talked about this before with other guests, but the most important thing you can do is get good boots. So that's even before your new bow, broadheads, knife, backpack, anything, because your feet have to get you up that ridge. And your feet, when you have 100 pounds on your back, are going to scream at you. And you have to have support. I've been there and I've screamed and it got ugly. I made it, but it was ugly and I had good gear. But over the years, I learned you have to have the gear that'll match whatever you want to do. And you have to have a good day pack that has a pack frame. Day pack just hangs on the pack frame that you're going to use to get your meat off the mountains or get your spike camp up the mountain, wherever you're going to do. And then after that, you start on your gear and, you just do that. But those are the two things that you have to have that are going to be reliable and bulletproof. Now, there's a lot of companies out there, and I can name 10 off my head that you could buy any of their packs and you'd be golden. And you're going to have to spend $1 though. And just like on your boots, you're going to have to spend more than your wife spends on her shoes. And we're talking long term because let's face it, you're going to be in probably the Rockies 10 days, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less a year, unless you're really fortunate to have multiple trips. But most people aren't that fortunate. So that's my 2 cents, Beau.
Yeah, no, Bruce, I'm glad you added it in there. One thing you just said that is something that took me even a little bit to learn was, when you buy, maybe you're spending more money on these boots or the pack, but they're going to last you a lot longer as well. Not only are you going to be more comfortable and more apt to want to climb that next ridge after 5 days of, grinding it out in the mountains, but they're going to last a lot longer and you'll get that money back, where you'd spend on 3 different pairs of, middle to lower end boots. You'll have in one pair of, high quality ones, and it ends up, kind of breaking even. And so that's, I try to, the buy once, cry once mentality when I can, and that comes over time. And with, all the gear now, I feel like after, 4 years of doing it, I have a pretty good system and a lot more high quality gear than I started out with, but it's, buying a little bit at a time and planning for that. So that's a big thing in my opinion. And then another item, especially when it comes to if you want to do like a backpack style hunt, I think proper, clothing layering systems can truly make or break that hunt, and the biggest thing is just remembering that cotton is not a good option.
It is not your friend in the mountains.
No, it's not. If you can remember that, you're off to a good start. And that starts at your underwear and socks. I can't tell you how many people will go and, buy, a nice pair of pants and a jacket, but they forget about their base layers. And that's the most important part is, being able to manage that moisture. When you're hiking in the morning and it's a little bit colder, you might have, a light jacket on or something over top of your base layers. And as you start going, it starts warming up and your body temperature's heating up. You need to be able to take that off and not have your base layers soaked because cotton just won't dry. and that's not something you want. That can be, even detrimental to your safety as well as your comfort. So that's something that I always, that I've learned and just over the last few years and I've really, kind of educated myself on that. So, and then again, going back to, knowledge in your head and knowing how to read a map and, whether I use an app on my phone, Onyx, to, as my main, GPS now, but I also carry a paper map and know how to use that and read topographical lines and everything else. I mean, I've always done that for whitetails as well, hunting where I do, but it's even more crucial out west in my opinion. So that's something that I think is really important. Bruce, do you have any other comments on the mapping side of things?
I was just on Michael Fuchs Outdoors, and he writes for Sportsman's Nation, Dan Johnson. And he uses his topo maps to find buck beds. And he can look at a topographic map, and tell you where the buck bed's going to be. If you can read it, the close lines, the contour lines that are close, that means it's steep. Further apart, it's flat or flatter. You can mark out saddles. You can mark out the little ridge that comes off the main ridge that the buck can lay on the top of and drop into a pasture, a creek, and you can see that on a topo map. No, you can't pick up a topo map and do that unless you've been doing it. But people who are attuned to topographic maps, one, are better hunters, two, are more confident, and they can set up on a mature buck because they know exactly where he's going to be. And, the kid is really good, and he's a student of Dan Infelt, who is one of the masters as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion.
Yeah, that what you just said right there is a lot of it when it comes to hunting mountain bucks in Pennsylvania. That's a lot of it. When you're in steep country like that, before I like to scout a lot in spring, and that's what I'll do is I'll pull out a map, and I feel like in each area is a little bit different, but they typically bed on similar elevations and with the way the terrain features go, so that when they're off on those, say like the point of a ridge, they can get that dominant wind, coming at their back, as well as, the way that utilizing the thermals in the mornings and the evenings, and, being able to see down over the hill. And there's so many things that, by able to read those topo lines and the maps, like you said, and how your guest, Michael there was able to figure that out. That's a huge thing when it comes to hunting some of the, the big timbered regions as well.
Yeah. And one thing, folks, if you're hunting whitetails or if you're hunting elk, the first time I hunted elk was back in the mid-'80s. And we came out from Wisconsin. And I had read Dwight Schuh's book about hunting elk. And so I just said, okay, he knows what he's doing. And so I looked for benches in the topo maps back in Wisconsin. We're driving 1,000 miles. And then I looked for benches, and then north-facing benches. And then I looked exactly what I'm doing. We're sharing now. I look for the points, and then I look for saddles. And then throwing it all together, I did get within 50 yards of a bedded bull, and it was my first elk hunt, and I got excited, and I shot at him on the run and got enough hair off him to make a caddis fly. But, okay. And you go, oh my, I shot underneath him. And should I have taken the shot? No. Would I have taken the shot today? No. But it was my first go around. But I knew where he was. Secondly, I smelled him. And then I wasn't ready. I didn't see him before he got up. But by applying what I learned from a really good writer, a really great hunter, Dwight Schuh, I was able to do it. Now today, just transfer what Beau is sharing with you, what Corey Jacobson is sharing with you, Randy Newberg sharing with you, Jay Scott is sharing with you. All these guys know how to do it. And if you become a student, then you can have thrills of a lifetime.
Yes. No, I completely agree. And with elk, Corey specifically, along with those, those other guys, but Corey, helped me a lot with that. And when I had him on the podcast, the first go around, I'd already went through his online course that I mentioned earlier 3 times. And my first year out there, he talked about north-facing slopes and dark timber is a lot of times where the elk like to bed. And, if you can find an area with feeds, so some meadows and water all in those areas, that's a pretty good spot. So I had marked on my GPS, potential elk bedding spots ahead of time. And the first night that I packed in there, we're heading up to where we're going to set up spike camp. And I looked across this canyon, and one of the spots I had marked for elk bedding was over there. And I bugled down into that canyon, and one bugled from its bed right in that spot, right in that area. And it was just such a, good feeling knowing that, wow, this information that I got, it can work. Is that going to always be the case, or will there always be an elk bedded there? Probably not, but that just helps so much, from, being able to understand that and being able to look at those maps and kind of have a game plan going into it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show tonight. Before we go, can I take a moment and say thank you? Listen, as we started the Whitetail Rendezvous podcast journey, we had no idea what to expect. But after 4 years, we received a ton of feedback from our over 400,000 listeners and climbing to 500,000. Speaking of which, we are now closing in on over 600 featured guests. Thank you. And a quick shout out to all those who have left an iTunes review and your feedback. I get those and really appreciate it. And it's awesome to see what you have to say, and we do read every single one of them. And I just want you to know that I am incredibly grateful for your kind words regarding the show. And all of the ratings and reviews help us attract more listeners. And if you're one of those new listeners, welcome. Great to have you. By the way, if you haven't taken the time to rate and review our show and like the Hunting on Private Land strategy on how to get permission to hunt a private property, go to whitetailrendezvous.com as a special gift for just rating and reviewing our show. When you get there, look for the start button to get the details. Listen, I'll share you the top technique from some of the top hunters in the country on how do they get permission to hunt on private land. I'll share with you the exact techniques they use to get permission. As my way of saying thanks for rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. So join us next time. And remember, we're all on this journey together, learning, sharing, and becoming 365 hunters. The other thing I want to share, I've hunted with a couple of upfitters, bow hunting, and they said they love to take bow hunters from the Midwest elk hunting because they know how to be quiet, they know how to stop, they know how to do all those type of things. But he says they make such good hunters because elk live in humongous areas, 10,000 acres an elk herd may live in. But at any one time, they're only 10% of that habitat. So you have to find them. And then it becomes a cat and mouse game, just like it is with whitetails. And I always remember that because that wisdom was given me back in the 80s. And I'm going, okay, I can do this. And if you just listen to what Beau just said, he got the information, went to school, got schooled up, and just said, okay, I can do this. Got his maps out, figured it all out. And gee, that's a perfect place. He bugled and a bull responded. Well, what do you think that did is his confidence? I can do this because I know people that have looked at the Rocky Mountains and looked at the basin we're going to hunt and said, there's no way. It's just too much. It's overwhelming, folks, but it isn't. If you take it apart, put it in 400-acre parcels, and then figure out where the elk are.
Yeah, Bruce, no, I couldn't agree more with that. And like you said, it's the same, a similar mentality when it comes to whitetails and you're, scouting a piece of public land or a farm or whatever it is. And you're taking these, big pieces and you're trying to narrow down to the most likely areas that they might be and then focusing in on those smaller areas. And, that's what I try to do is, I'll look at a giant area of a unit and start by, picking out 10 spots that look good from afar. And then I'll start dissecting those, smaller areas and, kind of putting together, a list of, what I think has the best potential, what is the lowest, and kind of, organizing it that way. And the only thing you can do after that is going in and seeing if your research and your planning is, true. And, it might not be, like you said, they only live in 10% of their, their range at any time. And, so you might go in there, it might be the perfect looking elk habitat, but they might not be there. And that's the game. And you just got to keep going and don't get discouraged with it. In my experience, it seems like, elk hunting is a very, very mental game. And you just got to be confident in it when you have these plans put in place, and you always have backup plans, and because things usually aren't going to go right at first. If they do, that's awesome. That's great. But they don't always go that way. So you just gotta, have those plans in place to just keep trying and just keep, grinding for it.
The only thing I'd add right there at this time, and I can't believe 45 minutes have gone by so fast, is that if you see no fresh sign that poop on the trail that you can stick your finger in and it squishes, you can pick it up, put it in your boots, and it squishes, then you're doing okay. If you go and it's hard, like a pretzel or something, and you keep going and you spend a day and there's no fresh sign, there's no mucked up wallows, and there's no fresh rubs, guess what? The elk aren't there. They could be tomorrow or in 5 days or never that season. They've already moved through and they've taken the best food off, and it's during a rut, and the bulls get chased out, or he just fed up and he's going to go someplace else. So you have to find fresh sign. And if you don't find fresh sign, get out of there. It's just like you can hunt all your life on your 40, and if there isn't a mature buck on there, you're never going to kill him.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add there, Bruce, was just real quick an experience I had last year. I was in Colorado and I went to a spot I was the previous few years, and there was always elk there. I went and we were about 3 or 4 days behind. And so we had to keep moving. And it took me it was a lot drier last year. So they weren't in the high country. The food wasn't there. They had moved out, and to go lower in that part of the unit, it was all private land. So I had to move to a completely different area of the unit, different elevation, just change it up before I ended up getting into elk. That took 6 days before I got into them, and it just was constantly moving and moving and moving until you find them. And like you said, with the fresh sign, I mean, a lot better than I do, but it's something that I've been picking up on. If it's not fresh and you can usually, smell them like they were there, then you got to keep moving.
The best sign I've ever smelled is a barnyard. You can smell their poop and you can smell their pee and you can smell the running bull. If you get that in your face, stop, knock an arrow, and figure it out.
Yeah. Yep. And you'll know that smell.
I just got to laugh because, it's fun. It's the adventure. Talking to somebody like Beau, and we're out of time. We've already burned through 45 minutes. Beau and I have actually been on for over an hour. But Beau, this won't be the last time. I head to Utah next week with Michael T. Merrill. He drew a limited access tag, and I'm going to go long distance scout for him. And so I can't wait to share the pictures if we end up closing that deal with you. But sir, I just, you lived up to everything I had hoped, and you're wonderful for the industry because we need young people like you that can figure stuff out. But better than that, like Dan Johnson talks about, he's a communicator and an influencer, and he educates people about what we're passionate about. And you're right in that league. And I'm just honored that we'll become, develop a relationship, and who knows, maybe we'll even hunt together sometime.
Yeah, Bruce, thank you so much. One, for the kind words, and two, for, having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation, and definitely hope we can chat some more here in the near future. I'm looking forward to seeing how your season goes.
Well, so am I. I mean, and talking to you, I'm going, oh, and I'm already, I was already, thinking, okay, now if that wall isn't there, where am I going to go? Because I do have 3 separate, my hunt plan, a la Corey Jacobson. I start hunting the 23rd because that's the peak of the moon, and that's the peak of everything, a la Corey Jacobson. So am I a Corey Jacobson fan? Yes, I am. Go read his stuff. And if you're elk hunting, well, you won't hear this, before the elk season. But anyway, just get his stuff. I mean, just do it. Spend $100 and get his stuff and become an elk hunter. Closing thoughts, Beau?
The last thing I just want to say, Bruce, is to anyone listening, if you ever had the inclination to want to go on a Western hunt or any sort of hunt that's out of your comfort zone, put it on the plan and do it. It's easy for me to say that, but you will not regret it. Even if you can prepare as much as you want, for your first hunt out west, and you're still not going to be, 100% prepared. And that's okay. You'll learn so much by doing it. And I can promise you, after you do it once, you'll figure out how to do it again. So that's just my closing thoughts on that.
I agree. Amen to that. And can't wait till the next time, Beau.
Sounds good, Bruce. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.